Okay, good morning to everyone. And today I am presenting this paper that I developed with Luciano and with Marina Bertolini from the University of Padua. The motivation for this paper starts from this institutional document of the Italian Authority for Electricity and Gas, AEG, that includes in its strategic objective the promotion of smart grid investment for two relevant reasons. One is to improve the service quality to the user, and then to facilitate the integration of renewable plants. The authority in this document also emphasized one possible problem to implement this smart grid. That is that the DSO, that is the distributor that is in charge of implementing this smart grid investment, has not direct incentive to do this and will always prefer traditional investment that can reduce the operating cost. So they suggest that the regulation and the remuneration of the DSO should change towards output-based incentive scheme in order that the DSO will have measured incentive, more incentive to invest in smart grid. This output-based scheme means that the remuneration of the DSO should depend on some observable outcome, like the state of the grid, like the power flow within the grid, or also the fraction of energy from renewable plants that is within the grid. In this paper, we start by this institutional framework, and then we try to understand what can be the market determinant of a smart grid investment and what can be the different impact in the local market. The paper is divided in two parts. First, we present a very stylized model where we try to represent electricity market. And in the second part, we simulate our model using real data on photovoltaic producer and plants. So our focus, both in the model and the simulation part, is on photovoltaic producer because we would like to test what can be the impact of the smart grid to facilitate the involvement of renewable plants, how the authority was saying. And we focus on the photovoltaic producer because they are the more numerous in Italy and also because of the availability of this data. In both the theoretical and then the simulation part, the intention is to understand how the market can react to this investment in order to make some policy implication related to the type of regulation that should be implemented to facilitate the realization of smart grid. First, before presenting the model, I will propose you two definitions of smart grid to understand what we mean when we're speaking about smart grid. One is the definition of the European Commission that say that they are a sort of energy network that can automatically monitor energy flow and adjust to change in energy supply and demand accordingly. The other one is from the US Department of Energy that say that smart grid investments are fundamental to allow operators to assess the grid stability. And then they provide also some examples. For example, there can be some advanced digital methods that give consumers and also the other operator better information. And then there can be also some other device that reroute the power around the problems, or some batteries that store excess energy and make it available later to the grid to meet the customer demands. So, starting from this definition, what we consider smart grid in our paper, we consider smart grid an investment that is able to reduce the demand, but better say the adjustment between the demand and energy supply uncertainty. Of course, it is a simplification, so it's an investment that reduces uncertainty in the market at the equilibrium, but it's a simplification that we use and we distinguish this investment from the traditional investment that increase the size of the grid that normally aim at reducing the operating cost. So, smart grid reduce uncertainty, and the traditional one reduce the operating cost. How we introduce this in the model? How I said before, and according to the definition of the European Commission, the uncertainty is related to the demand function. And the equilibrium level of demand or supply, we consider in the model that there is uncertainty of this equilibrium demand, is made by unexpected part, and then is made also of a random shock. We put a parameter in front of this random shock that we call theta, and this theta represents in our model the weight of this random shock in terms of market equilibrium conditions on price and quantity. So we can also see this theta as an inverse proxy for the smartness of the grid. In fact, an higher investment of smart grid that we call I is able to reduce this theta. So is able to reduce the uncertainty in the market. Why this uncertainty is important for the operator of the market? To understand this, we need to introduce the payoff of the different operator in the market. I always say at the beginning we focus on photovoltaic producer, so on small producer, and we consider this small producer as risk averse. The payoff of this producer, we model it as with a car utility function. If we took the expected utility of a car utility function, we can rewrite the payoff for the producer as the certainty equivalent. So by the profit given by their investment minus the risk premium. What are the decisions that these producers should make? The first is whether they want to enter or not the market. And second, the level of installed capacity, to the size of the plant that they want to build. So the revenues are made by the price multiplied by the expected production of the plants. So the production is given by the installed capacity, so the size of the plant, multiplied by a parameter F that measures the estimated annual production for 1 kilowatt of installed capacity, and then is also multiplied by the useful life of the plant that is represented in terms of number of years that we call N. Then there is a fixed and a marginal cost, and the risk premium is given by the volatility of revenues that of course are driven by the volatility related to the demand function, multiplied by the coefficient of risk aversion that can be higher or lower depending on the type of producer. Our distributor operator studies the DSO. Then in the benchmark case we consider DSO as risk neutral. However, we also consider an extension where it is risk averse. The remuneration we consider for simplification as fixed, but after we change this type of remuneration. Then of course there are the operating costs that depend on the level of the total quantity that flow in the grid. And then there is the investment cost in smart grid that we consider as linear. Okay, we solve this problem in a very simple way. It's a sort of stack and bell problem, so we solve by backward induction. So first we found the equilibrium in the market, so we solve the problem of the producer. We look whether they decide to enter the market and the size of the plant that they want to build. And in the second stage, the DSO will decide how much he wants to invest in smart grid by anticipating how the reaction of the market will be when increase in investment in smart grid. What are our results? The first is very simple. You just say that the aggregate installed capacity by photovoltaic producer increase in the investment in smart grid. And the second proposition is also say that the higher the investment in smart grid and also the higher the number of firms that are entering the downstream market. A corollary from this proposition is that also there is an effect in market price that will reduce because of this new entry of producer from renewable resources. The fourth proposition is that the level of smart grid maximizes the total welfare, so the payoff of the DSO plus the consumer surplus plus the producer surplus is of course higher compared to the level of smart grid investment chosen by an independent DSO. An independent DSO that does not care so much about uncertainty, so is risk neutral, will assign an investment in smart grid equal to 0, and this is what also the authorities suggest in this document at the beginning, is in some way it is a little bit risk averse. It will have a positive level of investing in smart grid, but still lower compared to the first best. Okay, in the second part, we simulate our model. So we have the data of all the population of photovoltaic plants that was installed in the last 10 years in Italy. We have then the average yearly price for the spot market that are divided by the different zones in Italy. And also, given that photovoltaic plants were highly subsidized in Italy in the last year, we also can observe how much incentive each plant received in the past. Related to the marginal cost to build the plant, we look at some private case study. Our range of the marginal cost is between 1,500 and 3,500, and this cost is decreasing over time because of some technological improvements. From the PVG's database, then we can estimate our parameter that we call F, that just say how much, what is the estimate production for 1 year for 1 kilowatt of installed capacity. Finally, we use the ISTAT database, that is the Statistical Italian Office database, to estimate the parameter of the demand function. Okay, this first graph that I show you is just the actual situation in Italy. So these are the number of plants, the number of photovoltaic plants. The dark side, where it's darker, it means that the number is higher, that are installed in Italy. So there is some heterogeneity within the different regions. And this is the installed capacity. Of course, the two proxies, the two measures are highly correlated. And in our case, this is our benchmark case because we consider that without some specific incentive, our DSO will not have an incentive to invest in smart grid. So we can consider this case the case without investment in smart grid. Okay, but these are real data, you can say. Then we simulate our model. Starting from this real data, we try to estimate what is the first best investment in smart grid that will be optimal for the society in the different region of Italy, so in the different municipality of Italy. And these are our results. Still the dark side means a higher investment in smart grid. Of course, what this graph told us, it just said that it's for the society, it's more beneficial to invest in smart grid in zone or in region where there are an existing higher number of photovoltaic producers and higher number of installed capacity. So the level of optimal investment in smart grid depends also on the actual situation of the market. Okay, and these last two graphs instead look at the impact of the smart grid. So we simulate, starting from this smart grid investment that is optimal for the society, what will be the impact in terms of new entry, so new plant that can be built, and also the installed capacity by the new entry. What is interesting, maybe this simulation we just made at the last moment, so maybe they're not so clear, this graph. However, what's interesting is that the impact is much stronger in the northern part of Italy, and then in the region where there are big cities. So it seems to be that the impact of the smart grid is higher where there are a stronger demand. So the terminal of smart grid is more the supply side. Instead, the impact of the smart grid in terms of new entry, in terms of installed capacity, really depend on the demand side. Okay. Just to conclude, the work is very preliminary and there are much improvement to be done. However, what's the main purpose of this work and what we can already see from this work? First, we propose a theoretical setting in the simulation to to show which can be the determinant effect of the smart grid. And the first message is that the determinant and also the impact of the smart grid can really depend on the market situation. So can really depend on the actual situation of the market and also on the potential demand, also the electricity demand. So for this reason, when the authority should set the optimal regulation, should consider this also the situation of the market. What is missing in this paper, that is the final objective of our paper, is missing all the regulation mechanisms, because the first development, because it's still incomplete, of the paper is to find which is the type of regulation that the authority can implement in order to get close to the first best. What we can say just for the moment is that the classical regulation, that is just an enumeration based of the level of investment is not sufficient, how the authorities say it, because it does not provide enough incentive to the DSO. So it's true what the authorities said at the beginning, that it's optimal to propose an output-based regulation. And in the next months, we would like to compare different output-based regulations. So a regulation where the remuneration of the DSO is based on some observable outcome. Also, another possible regulation should be a sort of integration, so to include in the decision-making process not only the DSO, but also the producer or the consumer through some representative of the consumer. So we would like to look how this type of regulation can be implemented and what can be the impact in terms of smart grid investment. Okay, related to some other possible future development that we would like to implement in this work. First one, with the simulation analysis, we would like to compare what's the difference between traditional investment that can decrease the operating cost and smart grid investment that can decrease uncertainty in terms of the impact on for the renewable plants. So whether it's true that smart grid investment can be better with respect to traditional investment in terms of new entry. And the last one is that given that the photovoltaic plants receive a large amount of subsidy, we would like with the simulation to test whether the smart grid can still help the photovoltaic plants also if we delete this subsidy from the central government. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Las tres seguidas.